I'm here to talk to you today about your journey that you've decided to go on to reach 10% body fat. Now, this is a journey that I've been on many times myself. I've helped hundreds of people reach the body fat level that they're after. And so I want to talk to you about some of the things that aren't usually discussed when it comes to how do you get to 10% body fat. And we're starting right now. So in today's video, I want to break down a couple things that really go into taking your body fat from, say, 15% down to 10% body fat. Now, if you're watching this video and you're much higher than 15% body fat, there are different discussions to have, right? Just how to learn nutrition and training and cardio to get yourself into that position. But what I want to talk today is about that final step, okay? What takes someone from looking pretty good to looking absolutely ridiculous right here. So I'll post some pictures and videos here of myself and my clients at 10% or below body fat so you can see just what it looks like to be there, because there's a lot of interpretation that goes into 10% body fat, but I think most of us can agree that you've got a well-defined six-pack, right? You don't have really any love handles, and you feel really good about your physique, especially when you're in the gym working out. So we're gonna talk specifically about a question that I got on my Instagram direct message. So if you guys like this type of information, hit subscribe. I'm a coach, and I love giving you guys the information that I give my clients and that I use on myself for the experience. And today's question comes from my Instagram. So if you'd like to send me questions, go to my Instagram, send me your questions. I'd love to answer them. Hello, Paul. First time for me to try to get to 10% body fat, see lower abs. How hard is it to go from 15% to 10%? What should I expect? All right, now that we know the question at hand, I want to help you understand the process and why it's pretty rare to go from 15 to 10% body fat. What happens in that range that makes it so difficult? Because it doesn't sound that difficult, right? Losing 5% more body fat. But this is where, from a coach, you have to take a really good look at the big picture, because this is where you have to have a goal. You have to have a goal, and it can't just be to reach 10% body fat. Very few people are gonna make it to 10% body fat if their goal is just to look a little bit better, okay? So my first thoughts when it comes to this is, what is your why? Because your mind and your body are going to begin to fight you when you get below this 15%, 12%, and especially 10%. And what happens when your mind and your body fight you? Well, some strange things happen. When you get very low body fat, one of the things that I've noticed is that you focus more on food. Your hunger is going to become more present. To overcome that, you have to have a reason. You have to have a reason to be hungry. I think most of us are not really used to dealing with hunger, and it's probably one of the great things I learned about losing body fat, because a lot of us fear that if we're hungry, we're going to be losing muscle. Well, rest assured, I promise you're not losing any muscle just because you're hungry, but your brain is going to mess with you. This is the psychology of weight loss, and it's probably the most misunderstood part about fat loss. And it's the one thing, the behavior change, that I really try to impart on my clients and the people that I'm trying to help get to this shredded level. Now, I typically work with competitors. Now, I myself am a competitor. I might have some videos to show you, some videos of my clients to show you. I promise you, when you know you're going to be getting on a bodybuilding stage, if anyone's ever been to a show, you've seen what they look like, that's very motivating, okay? Knowing that you're gonna be standing on stage next to somebody that's working their butt off to get as shredded as possible with as much muscle as possible, that alone is going to help drive that change. So what I typically suggest someone that doesn't wanna do a bodybuilding show is you have to have something motivating. You know, there are a lot of events in our life that have a timeline. So the first thing I wanna tell you guys is create a timeline for this and stick to the timeline. It's going to create behavior change. Now, what can the timeline be for? Well, it can be for a vacation, it can be for a photo shoot, it can be for your wedding, it can be for a family reunion, a class reunion. Heck, it can just be because you're going to a music festival and you want to look good with your shirt off and meet some ladies. Listen, I'm not above being narcissistic, okay? We all have narcissistic tendencies, and if it's something you're passionate about, it goes well beyond narcissism, right? It transcends that. I think a lot of us, myself included, got into lifting weights thinking, hey, I'm gonna get shredded so that the girls are interested in me. The girls don't give a shit about how shredded you are, okay? But what I will say is the people that have put the effort into time into getting the physique that they're after, it does other things. It's a confidence builder, and that's probably more interesting to the opposite sex than, you know, having some six-pack abs. In fact, Most girls believe that any guy that spends that much time focused on their physique, well, they're probably too self-centered to give a crap about a girl anyway, right? So now that we've got the first thing tackled, we've talked about, okay, set the goal, set the timeline. How long is it gonna take you to get from 15% to 10% body fat? I mean, you can do the math on that. You know, if you're at 15% body fat and you wanna get to 10%, just look at what your weight is at now. If you're at 200 pounds and you're at 15% body fat, that should be around 10 pounds, okay? But that 10 pounds can't just come from weight loss, okay? It needs to come from fat loss. And the leaner you get, the more difficult it becomes to avoid lean body mass loss. So this is where nutrition becomes very important. And this is when hunger begins to set us up. So the most important factor in my mind for reaching that 10% body fat is paying attention to your protein total for the day. What does protein do for us? Well, we all know about the idea of, drinking a protein shake post-workout because it's good for the gains, but why? What is it about protein that helps us? Well, it helps us in a lot of factors, okay? Obviously, there's something called muscle protein synthesis, right? We break down muscle when we exercise, we ingest protein, and that is going to be put back on our body in tissue in the form of new muscle, right? Muscle growth, muscle hypertrophy. But when we're in a deficit and we're trying to lose body fat, we're often under eating calories, perhaps overdoing the cardio, and there can be an issue. So if you have to lose 10 pounds, you might want to plan for 12 to 13 pounds to actually reach your goal. I would typically tell you to set your protein at about your goal weight, right? That's going to be a really nice amount. So if your goal weight is 190 pounds and you eat 190 grams of protein a day, that is going to be plenty of protein to ensure that you're not losing muscle. The other magic thing about protein is that if we break our meals up throughout the day, let's say we do 5 meals at 40 grams of protein estimated throughout the day. Obviously, if we're at 190, it might be a little bit less per meal, but the point being is that if we break those meals up throughout the day, it's gonna do something very nice for us. Protein is the macronutrient that provides the most satiety, meaning when you eat protein, you stay fuller longer than you would if you eat carbs or fats. Why is that? Well, protein produces a hormone called PYY. It's the satiety hormone. So when you increase your protein, what you essentially do is increase your fullness throughout the day. Combining that with drinking more fluids, you can actually feel fuller throughout the day. Now the trick here is that protein sources often contain fats and perhaps even some carbohydrates. So you have to pay attention to where you get your protein from, and this is why you hear things like lean protein sources. Single ingredient sources of protein, things that are very low in fat, like whey, even vegan protein powders, the one that I came out with, Core Nutritionals does a great job of this, of keeping fat low, things like fish, lean meats like some of your leaner steaks and porks and chicken and dairy. And there's even great vegan and vegetarian protein sources out there that don't have a lot of fats. This is going to be a very important part of getting to this 10% body fat. You're gonna have to learn to deal with hunger, but you also wanna learn to put yourself in a position to eat enough food. So now that we're eating enough protein, let's talk about how do we actually get the body fat off. Now, I've talked about this at length in many other videos, okay? If you guys wanna know how to set up your macronutrients and all that, I have a free macro calculator on my website. But what I want you guys to understand is that we have to be creating a caloric deficit. And a lot of us are nowadays trying to use the technology to tell us, hey, I burned 800 calories during my workout. I'm only eating 800 calories. How come I'm not losing weight? Well, I got news for you. First of all, those calculations are wrong. You didn't burn 800 calories, you burned 150. Second of all, you didn't just eat 800 calories. You're not weighing your food out. You're actually eating closer to 3,000 calories, right? There's these ideas that a diet can be simplified. And what most people fail to do to get to 10% body fat is be accountable. And I'm talking accountable for everything. Every single thing that goes in your mouth needs to be accounted for. You need to start understanding. Now, you don't need to do this forever, but you need to start looking at food, weighing it, and tracking it according to your goals. Now, once you start to learn what food looks like that weighs 6 ounces or that weighs 100 grams, what actually a tablespoon of peanut butter looks like, you'll actually start to see, okay, this is what food I need to reach my goals. The number one difference maker for myself and for my clients that have success is that we are pre-preparing our meals. What do I mean by that? We are cooking our food, putting it in our Tupperware, and we're just setting it and forgetting it. We're not trying to, throughout the day, figure out what to eat. You need to plan ahead your meals. You need to know what you're eating tomorrow. You need to open up your app, put all your meals in your app so that the next day you're just going through the motions. This takes the stress out of eating. This takes the emotion out of eating. Heck, this takes the cravings out of eating. Because even if you think to yourself, I'm really craving something, you think, well, I've already got a meal in there. I'm just gonna go heat it up, eat it. And once you're done eating it, you feel better because you followed your plan, but you also feel full because what did you do? You made it a high protein meal. The final step that I find was the most difficult for me to overcome, other than like learning how to track my food, because that was definitely a difficult step initially. It was one of those things though that once you did it, man, it was like, that wasn't so hard. Why did I wait so long to figure it out? And that is cardiovascular activity. I think a lot of us, especially myself, I was a bro, I was trying to put on muscle when I was young, and I always heard, well, you don't do cardio when you're trying to build muscle. But there is a certain amount of cardio and a certain style of cardio that you can do that will not interfere with your muscle building, okay? Low intensity steady state, obviously guys, has become my go-to, okay? I've tried HIIT cardio, I've tried medium intensity steady state, which I would define as like going for a jog. But walking, incline walking, elliptical, even stairs and bike, where you're basically creating a nice sustainable approach to cardio, really allows you to create a deficit through movement. I think most of us move far less than we ever have in the history of our lives, right? Especially myself, business owner, coach, father, all the things that I do, sometimes the priority is not for me to be moving. Finding ways to move more has really allowed me to make fat loss a lot more effortless. I'm currently dieting. I've lost about 15 pounds of body fat, and I've actually put on a little bit of muscle, which I confirmed in the gym today. Yeah, that's right. Took some selfies in the gym. But the idea of losing body fat to get to 10%, I think for just about all of us, it's going to require some extra movement. So figuring out ways to move more throughout your day. The reason I don't like to just use diet, because you hear the adage, oh, well, if you just drop your calories, you don't have to do cardio. I call bullshit on that, and here's why. Because if you just drop your calories, your body, your brain will start to fight you. Human physiology dictates that as we restrict calories, our body starts to conserve energy. You'll find the lower body fat you get, the less hand movements you make, the less walking you do, you'll start to conserve energy. You'll start to think about, okay, I'm only gonna get off the couch once a day instead of my normal 5 times a day. It's really funny how you start to conserve energy, and if you're not aware of it, it can really set you back. And you'll think, wow, I pulled back more calories, but I'm not losing more weight. Why? Because our body gets very good at conserving energy. So what do I like to do to help my clients reach their goals? Be accountable. We track steps, and we do our cardio in a manner that's very predictable. We will go for a set amount of time, and if we're not making progress, I know I can make adjustments to our calories and an adjustment to our cardio to really get things moving forward. This is the type of data that very few people get. They'll look in the mirror and think, I'm not getting any leaner, oh, I'm not gonna get there. And one of the biggest things that I notice for most people is that they don't ever look at their backs. So be sure to take some pictures, because you might notice, I especially did the first time I ever dieted down to get shredded, I was so disappointed at the front. I thought, man, I'm not really losing that much weight. But my coach required me to take pictures of my back, and holy cow, did I notice my body fat on all my back came in way before anything on the front really started to happen. That's why measurements are good too, because my waist kept coming in. I didn't see it from the front, but those love handles disappeared. The fat in my upper back disappeared. Even some in my lower body disappeared before the ever desired six-pack did, right? All that body fat had to come off, guys, before I got to that six-pack. And I think that's a part of the psychology that this is, that most people aren't actually documenting the process. So be accountable to your nutrition and your cardio. Take pictures front and back every week. Take some measurements. Plan your meals ahead, right? And set a deadline. Say, I'm going to be at my goal weight or my goal body fat percentage by this date. If you do not create a deadline, you are not going to make it. And you know why? Because it's very easy when you're pretty lean, 12, 13%, and your friend says, hey, it's Super Bowl Sunday, I'm gonna go out and have some food, do you wanna come? And you say, you know what? Yeah, why not? It's the Super Bowl. If you have a deadline that's 4 weeks away from your photo shoot, you're gonna say, yes, I'll come watch the Super Bowl with you, but you either order something that fits your macros, you eat before you go, or you just bring your own food. And a lot of people will say, well, I don't wanna be the guy that brings their own food. That's why you're the guy that's not ever gonna reach the 10% body fat goal that you're after. You gotta be willing to do things that other people are not willing to do if you wanna look the way few people look. All right, guys, that's gonna be it for me today. Hope you guys are having an awesome Monday, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.